How to overcome like the frustrating writer's block that students may experience while writing the essay.
Jen, do you want to start, or I'm happy to start?
You jump in. Go ahead.
Go for it. Okay, yeah. So before I was in admissions, I worked briefly as a journalist, and I think one of the things that always helped me to get over writer's block is to free write and just sort of write what I think I wanted to say. And then oftentimes what I usually did was I would write up the first paragraph of a story that I was sort of working it out in my head, and then I would continue to write. And what would often happen is I would delete the first paragraph and I would make the second paragraph my lead paragraph, because it took me time to work the ideas out in my head, and that my head and my hands were not always very well connected until I developed a rhythm. And then once I developed that writing rhythm and I found a little bit of a voice, then I was able to zero in on the actual important things that I wanted to say. And so I often found that was a great solution. Write 2 or 3 paragraphs, delete the first one, reread the second one, and then you realize you've got it. So, you know, it may sound counterintuitive, but the solution to not being able to write is writing.
I knew you'd have a better answer than me, so I wanted you to go first, especially with your writing experience. But as you were talking, I was thinking about what I did when I was writing essays, and brainstorming blocks were frequent. I'm a very verbal communicator. That's typically how I brainstorm best. So I just one thing to maybe think about, as you get to know yourself and you know your style, talk it out with somebody. Talk out with a friend, a trusted friend, family member, maybe one of your peers who's doing the same process, and talk through the prompts and be like, well, you know, just start throwing out ideas. I have a tendency to write and try to just write from start to finish, and I struggle sometimes. So being able to talk about it feels like I don't have to commit to everything right when I start on that idea. And you know, especially if it's someone that knows you well, maybe they have some ideas to help you think about yourself in a different lens, and experiences that you might say, well, that's universal or average, and they're like, no, it's actually not. So that might be a helpful perspective too.
I'll chime in briefly. This is probably the only one that I'll actually chime in on, but EducationUSA, we work with students in preparing for the essays in different levels. And one thing, the intern mentioned topic choice, and sometimes you're given a variety of topics and you can choose from them. For example, the coalition or the Common App. So one thing we have students do is sit down and write a little bit about each one, and also just think about the topics. And usually you can identify the ones that you don't want to write about or can't write about or would struggle to write about. So sometimes it's easier to think which one I will not choose, rather than which one I'm going to choose. So I look at those topics, and usually there's one I could write about it, but it would just be too much energy. So some students I've heard will try to write an essay for each one and choose. I don't recommend you spend the energy. I think choose the one, if there's 2 or 3 that you just really don't want to do, just cut them out of your list of the essays that you're thinking about. And then later, as you write the others, you might think, oh, okay, I have an idea for that one, but don't spend energy on something that you hate. It's fine, because usually you'll find one that you'll say, wow, that's a fun one to write about. And that's probably the one you want to write about.
The next question is, how do I make my introduction more powerful and engaging?
Introduction. I mean, I have read of lots of essays, as has Jen, over the course of our careers, and I don't think there's a best way to start an essay. I think there's lots of different ways to start an essay, but I think one of the things that students sometimes try to do, maybe this is a don't, is they try to be too creative and use, as Jen was talking about, some of that flowery language, and they write about the topic in a way that makes it hard to understand what they're actually writing about. So I think one tip I might have is, at least in the beginning, try to be direct in articulating the topic that you are going to write about, the subject that you're going to write about. And this is where good writing matters, right? So we all learn about good topic sentences. Each paragraph has a point. Each final sentence in the paragraph has some kind of little either summary of the paragraph or lead into the next paragraph with the next topic sentence. And so I do think that's where the mechanics of learning how to write can be very helpful to you. But I actually think kind of being a little bit more direct than you sometimes even think you should be is helpful, because oftentimes students get caught up in sort of thesaurus style language, which we would say is overwriting. And what happens is they indirectly miscommunicate to the reader what it is they're trying to say at the very start of the essay. And then it's kind of hard to come back from that, because you only have 500 words. It's not very many words, and so you want to try to use every single word as efficiently as possible.
As Adam was talking, I was flashing back to essays that did that. And by the time I got to the middle or the end, I'd have to reread the beginning because I was confused. I think because the beginning was not direct enough. And as you're starting to realize, these aren't long essays. It's actually, most of the time students are trying to cut down to the word limit versus expanding. So using too much flowery language is only taking away from being that valuable content of who you are. And one last note, we asked for the essay, we're gonna read the whole thing. So I think as opposed to maybe other types of writing styles or writing pieces of writing, it's not about a hook. Like, we're gonna read it. And if the compelling part is at the end, that's perfectly fine too. Like, that's great. That's probably better because it shows a bit of an evolution and a growth and development. And so just know that we're reading the whole essay.
So I would like to ask you about some cliche essay topics that you think we should kind of avoid. Yeah.
That's a good question. I think part of what Adam talked about in a portion of our presentation, I think that I wouldn't want to discourage anyone from writing about any specific thing, because it's not for me to determine how important that was in your life. So going back to Adam's comments earlier, it's less about how cliche you think the event is or the experience is, and more about how you convey to us how you handled it, managed it, dealt with it, overcame it, grew and developed from it. That's where the focus should always be. And to another point that we made, we don't want you spending lots of time describing a situation to us. I don't want 4 paragraphs of every detail of an event that happened in a day in your life. I want the basics, and then I want to know about you and what came of it for you. So I know that's not the most direct answer to your question, but again, I fear discouraging anyone from anything that could be meaningful to them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think some cliche sounding events may actually be very meaningful for some students. And so it's not about cliche, it's about meaning. And the thing I might suggest you avoid, if I can just reframe the question, instead of thinking about cliches to avoid, I would think more about trying to avoid platitudes. And so platitudes are things like the statement, everything happens for a reason. Good things come to those who wait. Time heals all wounds, right? So these are examples of another way of using English that actually sounds very universal, but can, in your writing, make it sound very lazy. And you may have some meaning in that platitude, so it doesn't mean you should avoid them all the time, but you should avoid using a lot of them. because they sort of take meaning from other contexts and they throw it into your essay unnecessarily sometimes. And so trying to phrase things without using platitudes, that actually is something that as you're going through the editing process, I would recommend.
Some colleges may have supplementary essays with sort of weird, quirky, fun topics that might surprise some students. So do you have any tips on writing short essays or supplementary writings with these type of unexpected topics?
I think I referenced in the earlier presentation that would be my nightmare. That would be so stressful for me. So I appreciate students when you kind of go through these college essays and you're just like, wait, what are they asking? But to kind of pull back and really think about the college and why the college is on your list. What is it that you like about the school? And keep that in mind, even if you come across questions that are a little bit stressful. But I would say always answer. I mean, you've got to answer the questions, but don't, I would recommend trying not to put so much pressure on yourself to try to answer it exactly the way you think the college is, or try to find the most creative, most unique answer, because I don't think that's going to exist when they are reading thousands and thousands of these. So I think that just being really authentic with your response, what comes to mind? What is it that, what are your gut feelings on responding to these questions? I'm curious Adam's response. I haven't worked at any schools that have questions quite that unique. They are all a bit straightforward. So I don't know exactly how to answer it from like the admission lens.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked at institutions that had what were called quick takes, which is really like literally we just wanted 1 or 2 words, we wanted less than a sentence. They are what we would call reactions or sort of sentence thoughts. The first thought that comes into your head, just write that sentence. And Pomona does this. I mean, we love this. We spend a lot of time every April and May trying to rethink how we are gonna ask questions for students in order to sort of lighten the mood a little bit, to help them relax. And we have a question like that this year, where we sort of pit various things and we ask you to make some choices. Last year, the question that we kept from last year, which is one of our favorites, and we talk about this all the time in our office, is what is your favorite way to eat a potato? This is a very important question for us, not because the answer is going to get you into Pomona. It's because the idea is that we all have this common experience. At some point, everyone's eaten a potato, probably, but there are ways that potatoes are better prepared than other ways. And what do you think about that? And the idea isn't that your life hangs in the balance. The idea is that everybody might have some preferences, and we just want to get to know you a little bit. And so whether it's fried or French fries or a baked potato or pommes frites or however you want to think about your way of eating a potato, it's a light-hearted way for us to get to know you. And we do frame it that way. We're very direct about the fact that before you jump into the other essays, just, if you feel like it, give us your 2 cents, give us your quick take on these few questions. And we find that students are actually sort of relaxed by these questions. They sort of take some of the pressure off of the other essays because we've given their mind a little space to breathe.
Some students choose a topic of their choice for their essay and strive to show how well-rounded their personality is by speaking about many different spheres of their life. For example, academic achievements like Olympiads, volunteering, leadership, etc. As a result, very often they provide facts rather than feelings and reflection. Do you have any advice for students that have a lot to write about, or how should they focus their essay?
I would say generally facts should complement, not dominate the essay. And that really gets to the heart of speaking about what versus why. And that's in large part, particularly because of awards or honors, there are other places on the application for those awards or honors. So, if you won bronze at the IMO a couple years ago, there's a place for that. I don't think you need to write an essay restating it. It's a fact, it's in the application, and it's probably going to come up in other places. So why say it and waste that essay space because you're just repeating it for a third time? But if, for example, you are the only girl on your IMO team and you want to talk about what it's like to be a young woman who's making her way through the ranks of a very male-dominated space like IMO and the many math Olympiads you have to successfully complete before you get to the IMO team, that could be a really interesting essay, because I'm sure that as a young woman, you've confronted some stuff and you've heard some stuff and you have an experience that is different from all the other boys on the team. And you might be able to speak to some things that are really unique to you and really interesting to the reader by talking about how and why IMO matters and how you've succeeded, not what you achieved at the end. So even the topic can be treated differently based on the way you frame the questions you ask about the topic.
That's awesome. I would second all of that and just say some of my with the essays that I feel like are the biggest missed opportunities are a rewrite of a resume. And so just encouraging students to look holistically at the application if you feel like you're getting stuck in that realm of like the rewrite of your accomplishments in a narrative form. Try to pull back and look at the whole application and see where other things are landing, just like Adam said, and delve deeper into the things that are most important.
We are not be writing our essays this fall, but we would like to practice it for next year. So we were wondering like how we can prepare ourselves to write our essays for later on.
I'll be curious to see what Adam says, but my initial instinct is to not stress too much about it at this point in time, to live your life and enjoy the things that you are doing, take advantage of the opportunities in front of you. Maybe the one thing to start practicing is that reflective thinking. Just know that there will be a time soon that you will be writing a reflective essay. And so if you start thinking about things through that lens now, experiences and activities and accomplishments, it might be easier to get in that mindset in a year's time.
I would agree with that. I would say three things. Don't write your essay right now. Live life. Have some life experiences. The second thing I would say is journal. So keep a journal. Keep to Jen's point, a reflective diary. That isn't writing an essay, but it is forcing you to reflect on your experiences in life, which can have powerful downstream effects when you begin to write your essays. And three, I was like a nerd in high school, so I did this, and I'll just give you this tip. I used to keep a little book because I love vocabulary words and I spent a lot of time like learning language. So I used to keep a little book where I would write down all my favorite words, and then I would challenge myself to try to use the words in everyday language so that I felt like I had command over the words, so that I would be able to use the words in a way that I felt confident. So then when I used words that maybe were not as common in sort of everyday communication, I would say them in a way that made them sound common so that I could really understand them. So, that's a great way not just to practice your vocabulary, but also to introduce new words, which, words are ideas. So new ideas, ways to connect new ideas into your mental and linguistic framework. And that is a really great way to become a better writer, is to develop a more sophisticated understanding of how language connects ideas to other ideas.